All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Achieving Data Backup at Microsoft Office 365 Cloud. My name is Ashley Limbers, and I'll be your moderator. I'm the marketer here at Total Computer Solutions, and I'm excited to be hosting this session. Total Computer Solutions is a full-service provider of IT services and support, including network security, cloud computing, network administration, and managed backup services in Central North Carolina. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Al Murray. Al is one of our client strategy managers at Total Computer Solutions. He has over 20 years of IT experience navigating small and medium-sized businesses with their technology needs. He was fortunate to have served in the United States Air Force from 1993 to 1998. Al has been with TCS for the last 14 years, helping clients to achieve their technology and business goals. Before I hand the mic over to Al, I have a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover about this presentation and the Zoom platform. First, today's webinar will be available on demand after the live session and will be emailed to you. And next, we'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have a question for our speaker, please feel free to type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel. We'll be answering questions at the end of today's session. If we don't get to your question during the webinar, we'll be sure to follow up with you afterwards. And we'd like to encourage you to leave us feedback on today's webinar. You'll see a link in your browser when the webinar ends. So without further ado, I'd like to kick things off by welcoming our Client Strategy Manager, Al Murray. Al, over to you.
Thank you, Ashley. Appreciate everybody coming to this webinar on a Tuesday. Thank you for your time. I know you guys are busy. I saw a couple chats out there. We really appreciate you all taking the time to spend some of your business day with us. Well, so you done good. You made it to 2021. It was a pretty rough year, and 2020 being as such, and for obvious reasons, a lot of us are now getting back to the workplace, which is nice. And so I want to kind of share a couple of things. Ashley shared a little bit about my bio, but one of the jobs that I started in information technology was in 1999, which is 2 decades ago. It's hard to believe, as a computer operator for a computer called an AS400, which, if some of you can remember, that was kind of the small version of a mainframe. My main job there at the time was to ensure that this food distribution company that had a very good sized operation had the ability to have their data backed up. And so the reason I share this story is it lines up with, even back then, companies had to have a backup strategy with regards to how they took care of their organization's data. And so I would arrive on a Friday night, I remember it pretty vividly, around 6 o'clock on a Friday night, and wait for the operations in the warehouse to complete. I would get a call from the operations manager in the warehouse, and we would kick off the backup. And of course, back then, a backup, even though there wasn't as even close to the amount of data that we back up now, would take about 15 hours to complete. You would swap out a tape drive every 2 hours. You would have to pay attention as to when the tape drive would fill up. On top of that, there would be opportunities where a file would be locked. If you all remember, there was a time when you did a backup that if a file was backed up or a file was in use, you couldn't back it up. So I would get to sometimes call what they called an RPG programmer up to unlock the file in the middle of the night. We've come a long way. I mean, backups don't take 15 hours, but what's happened is we've done a lot of different things with our organization's data, and we neglect the fact that, is somebody taking care of it? So I talked a little bit about 2020. I like to start some of my webinars off with some humor. A lot of you have seen this meme out there with regards to some Back to the Future stuff. And, you know, the mad scientist, Doc Brown, was looking at Marty and says, whatever happens, let's don't go back to 2020. And so I found it kind of funny in the sense that it was a tough year. And I know a lot of folks started working out of their homes, and thankfully, because we leveraged software as a service or the cloud, we were able to do that almost seamlessly and not, in some regards, compromise security. So it's just been one of those things where I'm so looking forward to 2021 as we get deeper into the year. There is an opportunity for some normalcy, even though I know it will take some time. And so I was listening to a comedian the other day, and he said 2020 was so bad that we even talked about UFO sightings, and it didn't even register. So, but I'm glad that we're here. I'm glad that you guys are attending this webinar. And I like also to start my webinars with a little bit of personal application to what we're going to talk about. And so I was talking with some friends the other day, and they had mentioned that did you hear or read the disclaimer if some of you have an Amazon Alexa device that Amazon has written in their fine print that if you have company or a guest that it comes to your home, that you're supposed to announce the fact that you have at least one Amazon device that might be listening to your conversation. So, like a lot of things, I hear a lot of stuff, so I started digging around, and it is true. And just so you know, your conversations are being backed up by Amazon. And so if you go into your Amazon account and you go to devices, you can actually get rid of some of those conversations. Now, if they're listening to my conversations at my home, they're going to be bored to death. But the point of the matter is that we're always backing up data. And so you can see where I've took a snippet of one of my Echo Dots, and you can actually delete the voice recordings. Maybe that's something you might want to do on a regular basis, but just know that Amazon has a backup strategy around how they record your information. Now, when you delete that, it will say that it impacts Alexa's ability to learn your voice, but she's always done a good job of listening anyways. So I did that a couple of days ago and it didn't impact, but I just thought you should know about it. And it's a neat little tidbit about something that you might be up against in your own personal life. Today's topics is not going to be covering specifically around Amazon Alexa, but I do want to cover 4 specific things: common vulnerabilities of data, the value of your company's information, Microsoft Office 365 standard backup policy, and data and cybersecurity misconceptions in the cloud. And so hopefully, when we come out of this webinar, you'll have a better concept of these key topics. You'll have an understanding of what Microsoft actually provides as a software as a service provider. You'll hear the acronym possibly SaaS, and that is software as a service. And so let's go start the first topic, which is common vulnerabilities of data. So there's about 8 different ways that data is impacted. Some are more prevalent in today's world than others, and some seem a little bit like old IT, if you will. But we still have user error. We still have, I met with a customer just last week that some employee had accidentally deleted their entire half of their client list. And so luckily they had a backup, but it happens. Employee turnover, also something that happens here, unfortunately, with some frequency, in the sense that when an employee leaves and they're planning to leave, they can sometimes, depending on the employee, they may start deleting information and kind of cleaning up their files. We still have trouble with hardware failures. We haven't completely eliminated hardware. It's come a long way. Obviously, things like solid state drives have helped, with regards to reducing hardware failures. And we do not have as many on-premise servers as we used to even 10 years ago, but they still can lead to huge data loss. Theft, always something that is not going to go away. We still have people working out of their homes, transporting laptops in their cars, possibly having offices that are unlocked. And so they still contain corporate data. And of course, you know, losing your phone these days almost feels like, I think I read a survey once that most people would rather lose their wallet than their phone. And I guess in some regards, that's true, because it seems like data on a phone is just very, very coveted. We still deal with some natural disasters, physical disasters such as flooding, fires, of course, still impact some of our organizations. We still have, as I mentioned earlier, some on-premise server hardware that has some role on a company network. And then there's the good old-fashioned cyber attacks that we're having to deal with right now with regards to phishing and password attacks, all different types of variations of malicious software, and then ransomware attack, which we'll cover, which is always in the news, unfortunately, these days. And then malicious deletion, just angry employees on the, trying to create havoc on, I'm not sure why you would want to burn that bridge, but we do have employees that become angry and just, have malicious intent. So I get this asked a lot sometimes in a business meeting, a lot of times with a customer who just really doesn't understand, what the value is of data. Big thing right now is that credit card information is actually not as coveted as it used to be. Thankfully, our banks and financial institutions have done a really good job of doing fraudulent detection. So a lot of times now, if your credit card is compromised or your debit card's compromised, there have been some really good algorithms that have been written to help detect that and find ways to identify that quickly. And bad actors or cyber criminals have determined that that's just not something that's worth a lot of value. So currently we show it between the range of $2 to $5 per record. Customer personal identification information and employee personal identification information, or customer PII or employee PII, often has a record of $20 to $450 per record. These are information that can be used to start other types of attacks, and so they are coveted by cyber criminals. Surprisingly, and I'm not sure that this is a little bit low in the sense that medical records typically have a high target value for cyber criminals, primarily because the fact that if you have someone's medical information, you can pretty much start a brand new identity. So identity theft a lot of times comes from the theft of medical records, because you have at least last known good addresses, social security, obviously, height, weight, anything that's very particular to a person's identity is contained in medical records. So they are a high target value. And then, of course, just the good old fashioned, we want to steal information like sales or financial information for a company, or the secret ingredient that a company uses to have a competitive advantage in the marketplace. Those are both targets that also have value, but not as easily sold in the black market. So the other thing is you don't have to have really information that they want. They just want you to pay a ransom. And so ransomware attackers don't need to monetize stolen data. They just basically hold your data hostage. And then, of course, as you know, you either have to recover from a backup or pay the ransom. So 58% of businesses who paid a ransom in the last 12 months did so because the cost of the ransom was less than the cost of lost productivity from downtime due to the attack. And obviously, we'll cover an example of that here about what happened here recently as well, and where they made that cost analysis. Does your company mandate compliance regulations regarding how you protect data? So there are a lot of institutions that depending on the vertical business that you're in, that require you to do some things around compliance. Obviously, healthcare is HIPAA, financials could be SOX or FINRA, and then you've got retail and hospitality, and of course, state and local government, all of which require you to have some type of backup strategy over your systems. And so healthcare, like we talked about, high value target with regards to electronic medical records, social security numbers, really what they want, are regulated with HIPAA, but the fines can be in the millions. Financial and insurance were the second most breached in 2018. Financial does a really good job at elevating their security posture, but still a huge target for cyber criminals. And then, of course, we've got retail and hospitality, which continues to be a target value for cyber criminals. As you know, you've seen some of the hotel chains, and of course, we won't ever forget about Target years ago getting hit. So always something that they're looking for. And then state and local government, because typically they run a very thin IT budget, were attacked pretty heavily by ransomware specifically. And there's just been multiple examples of that happening throughout the United States, including Charlotte-Mecklenburg County, which is our largest county in North Carolina, was hit about a year and a half ago with a huge ransomware attack. So it's all localized as well. So everybody has done, a lot of people have done, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people have done a really good job of no longer having to manage email in particular, in-house or on-premise, however you want to state that. In Office 365, which is basically software as a service from Microsoft, has all of these other products that are being leveraged as well. And during 2020, as you know, for instance, Microsoft Teams became a huge hit when working remotely, along with SharePoint and OneDrive. Email, always there, business class email. It's how we communicate internally and with our external and internal customers. But there's a lot of misconceptions about what Microsoft provides with regards to their backup around specifically all four of these products that are part of the O365 family. Question is that always gets asked, doesn't Microsoft back up our data? And they do, but I would say it's a very light backup strategy. And it's almost like they did it because they had to. So the statement, if you read, again, kind of like reading the legal document for Amazon Alexa, that you have to share the fact that if people enter your home, that you have an Amazon Alexa device that could be recording. Microsoft, if you read their services agreement, states, we strive to keep the services up and running. However, all online services suffer occasional disruptions and outages, and Microsoft is not liable for any disruption or loss you may suffer as a result. In the event of an outage, you may not be able to retrieve your content or data that you stored. We recommend that you regularly back up your content and data that you store on the services or store using third-party apps and services. So what they're basically saying is they have a backup. They can't guarantee that they'll recover the data, and that they recommend you start looking towards a third party to help provide a more robust backup strategy. And we do know that around email, Teams, and SharePoint and OneDrive, that they only keep the data for 30 days after it's been deleted. And so that is a huge thing that's out there. We've had a couple even clients that have called that have deleted, an employee left, they deleted emails, 30 days later, we're not able to retrieve it. We also are seeing more and more people asking us to recover Microsoft Teams channel conversations, and that is specific right now. Those of you who use Microsoft Teams to leverage and they create channels, those conversations are being asked to be recovered as well, because they are part of your business communication, if you will. And NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, also has created what they call a cybersecurity framework, and the huge part of it is recovery. Identify, protect, detect, respond, and recovery, which is an important reason that we bring this webinar to the marketplace, is just to get people to get an idea of like, what is, if you look at the NIST framework, what is, how are you going to recover data? And so I've got a little snippet there about every company used to back up their on-premise email server. That was a no-brainer. But then once we moved everything to Microsoft, we just kind of said, hey, they've got it. And they do a little bit, but they're not going to do it all. And so I think if there's anything that you should take from this webinar, is ask yourself, go back to your organization and make sure, if you're dealing with any, not just Microsoft, if you have Google G Suite, if you're using Salesforce as your CRM, that you ask your cloud provider what their current backup strategy is and what can you do to strengthen it even further. Another great final statistic is that 73% of companies hit by ransomware did not pay the ransom attributed to their decision because they had a full backup. So that's going to help you if you have the unfortunate circumstance of having a ransomware attack. Having a good backup gives you the confidence to know that you can survive and not pay the ransom. Common objections. It won't happen to us. Yeah, it's a coin flip. I had a customer the other day, and they, we were talking, of course, about some of the current ransomware attacks, and they know that they're just fortunate that it hasn't happened to them. And that's a scary strategy that's a scary kind of world to live in, just kind of hoping that it won't happen to you. So we have to kind of come up with some type of parachute plan, if you will, if it does. We're too small to be targeted for a cyber attack. Actually, the smaller you are, it's just easier for them. Quite honestly, if obviously we know some of the local businesses in the area that are pretty good size have a full IT security staff. If it can happen to them, it definitely can happen to a small business. And so we're definitely a target for cyber attacks. We don't have anything hackers want. You have money. They may not want your data necessarily, but you want your data because you need your data to run your business. So as we talk about ransomware, they don't need to leave with the information. They just need to lock it down. So they don't need anything that you have, but they do want your money. Most of our data is in the cloud. That means it's safe, right? So software as a service applications are still vulnerable to data loss. And in fact, over 70% of data loss in cloud apps is due to accidental or malicious deletion by end users. So we still have, even though we've done a good job of putting your data in safe spots, we can't just sit there and think that they're not vulnerable. And last but not least, Microsoft stores our data, right? So we'll be able to get it back. O365 or Office 365 only stores data for 30 days, and Microsoft recommends the use of third-party backup solutions in their Microsoft service agreement. It takes businesses on average 140 days for data compromise to be detected. So 81% is what we see as a stat that IT professionals experience data loss in O365. I will tell you that even when we do restore or ask to restore data from Microsoft, a lot of times the recovery is not as clean as it would be as if you didn't engage with a third party that can organize the information properly. So also keep that in mind. It's just not how you recover the information, but is it put back in the correct places? So for instance, let's use email. If somebody double deletes an email at Microsoft Office 365, and we're within the graces of 30 days, we would be able to recover the actual email, but there's no guarantee it would be back in the folder structure that you had, those wonderful folders that you have underneath your inbox that organize email. Microsoft recovers it as a flat database, so it just gets put into your inbox. It won't be recovered the way you might have had it at a point in time. So just keep that in mind as well as we leverage maybe a third party to help with your backup solution at O365. The elephant in the room, obviously, almost old news now, a $5 million ransom for Colonial Pipeline. I just saw in the news today that they were able to recover some of that ransom, but Colonial Pipeline, they've got a business that is in probably the billions of dollars. So $5 million to pay a ransomware attack was probably a no-brainer. Most of the businesses, unfortunately, in the triad wouldn't survive that type of paying a ransom that large. So it says a lot about, unfortunately, what Colonial Pipeline was up against. Probably a very light, if any, backup strategy. So as you go and continue the rest of your day, just keep in mind that you will only, there's a lot of things that keep you up at night. And if you're in a situation where your primary responsibility is to think about how the organization operates, you probably want to at least give it some consideration as to how you're going to recover and what your backup strategy currently is with any of your software as a service providers. I always bring this one up because it's not as big as Colonial Pipeline or the meat processing company that recently got attacked. This one was just in our backyard a couple years ago, but it actually got the superintendent fired. This here speaks heavily to the inability to recover, and 30 days to fix the problem, almost $1 million. Most businesses can't survive being down for 30 days. It's different with the school system. I get it, but it's just one of those things that we definitely need to think about how impactful it will be without our information. So I would love to help. TCS would love to help you. We're here. I'll let Ashley speak a little bit to what we can offer as just a takeaway from our webinar. I really do appreciate your all's time today, and we'd love to sit down and offer some talk and have a conversation about your cloud backup strategy. And Ashley, I guess I'll pass the mic back over to you.
Thanks, Al. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for that great information. Yeah, so if you'd like to take advantage of that free cloud backup strategy consultation, just type it into your chat box or send us an email. Those are complimentary. So yeah, and if you attended this webinar today, we are going to get into the Q&A section of this webinar, but we are giving away 2 premium Grasshopper tickets. And so I'm going to go ahead and spin the wheel. If you pre-registered for this event, you are entered into the drawing. So let's see here.
Is that a real wheel,
Ashley? It is a real wheel. Yes, we got to make this fun. So All right, so Patrick Passo, congratulations. You have won 2 tickets, so I will follow up with you after this webinar. So yeah, let's get into our Q&A. We had some questions pre-submitted to this webinar that we're going to go ahead and go over. And then just as a reminder, if you have any questions for us, please type those into the chat box and we'll cover those. All right, so Al, the first question that we have is, I'm in charge of our cloud backup. We are currently using iDrive. Is it possible in MS Cloud to manage each user individually on the type of files to be backed up and their allocated space or allotted space?
Oh, good question. A really good question. So it sounds like you've at least you've thought about a backup strategy when you're leveraging iDrive, which is basic trip. I know iDrive a little bit in the sense that it does desktop backups. So you must be doing more than likely some type of desktop backups. But if you could think about it with regards to backing up in the cloud, it does take some user hand holding to get people to start saving stuff to OneDrive or SharePoint if you have it. Obviously, your email if it's at Office 365. But to your question, is it possible in MS Cloud to manage each user individually on the type of files we backed up and they're allocated in their allotted space? So I would say in your case, it would be getting them to start leveraging it at a minimum OneDrive so that it becomes part of a backup strategy. And then of course, if you want to have a more robust backup strategy versus just 30 days after deletion, we can offer something there as well. But it is starting to try to get them away from having to save things locally on a hard drive. Even though I know iDrive is a pretty decent product, I think you'll sleep better at night if you can get the end users to start really leveraging some of the cloud file sharing like OneDrive. So hopefully I've answered that question. I'm not sure. Did you have another one, Ashley?
I guess it would help if I unmuted myself. Yes, we have another question. The next question is, how often should cloud info be backed up?
Another great question. So how often and how much should you keep? I would say would even be the other part to that wasn't asked, but at a minimum, we do recommend that a daily backup occurs. More than likely, with a lot of the cloud backup products, they'll be backed up even when there's an incremental change. So for instance, if we'll just use a very basic file like a Word document or Excel file, if it was saved at OneDrive or SharePoint, after there is an incremental change or somebody makes a change to that document, we'll probably have a backup of it because you'll want to recover a previous version. But at a minimum, to the question, how often, it should be daily. More than likely, you'll get at least twice daily. And then, of course, retention is to keep it a lot longer than 30 days after deletion. So making sure that we can recover that file even a year afterwards would be nice, to give the organization some comfort. So.
All right, great. And so just to make sure, Office 365 only holds emails for 30 days after deletion, or is it for all email?
So I'm sorry, Ashley, repeat that one for me if you would.
Sure. Office 365 only holds emails for 30 days after deletion, or is it for all email?
Yeah, so it only holds email after you've emptied it out of your recycle bin. So you know how you usually get that one last place where you could delete it again, and it holds it at your recycle bin. After it leaves there, it is gone. But of course, if for some reason there's some shortcut keys where you can bypass the deleted items, the garbage can, if you will, and we can recover that with some of our third-party tools so that we can recover all email. And so there's a lot of misnomers about what Microsoft does with regards to a backup strategy. And this is one of the things that we're challenged with, is you're asking great questions. And yes, we can recover all email with our third party partner. So.
Okay, great. It looks like we've covered all of our questions. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. Al, is there anything that you wanted to include before we leave?
No, I just, as you continue on with your business week, and I know we're getting into the summer months, just take a moment, list all the primary applications that you use, whether it's OneDrive, whether it's Salesforce, whether it's Citrix ShareFile, you name the software as a service provider. We have to question, what their backup strategy. I would love to say ignorance is bliss, but it's not really it is bliss, but it's not really a strategy with regards to how we, if we don't ask, we're being negligent. So we need to ask anything that you use to run your business. We need a backup strategy around it. So I really appreciate everyone's time. I hope everyone has a great week.
Thanks, Al. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Just a reminder, if you would like to take advantage of that cloud strategy backup consult, please reach out to us. We would love to help you. You can visit our website at tcsusa.com. Follow us on social media. We do have an event on the 22nd. We are finally getting back to our lunch and learns in person. And so that is on our website as well. And the topic is going to be around cybersecurity. So if you'd like to register for that, please visit our website under the events tab. And we look forward to next time. Thank you guys for being here. Have a good day.
Have a great day.